This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate you guys being here. We've got a lot to get to on the recruiting front. Told you guys we were going to kind of reset where recruiting stands for SMU football in particular, but also we'll talk a little basketball. We'll talk a little transfer portal. But guys, first, I got to remind you that we are presented by our friends at StatusJet. StatusJet.com. You can reach out to David Henry and his team for all the information that you might need when it comes to making this type of a decision as to whether or not you want to pursue enjoying the experience of using a private jet charter company to take you wherever your heart desires. There's plenty of opportunities to go on great SMU road games this fall, but summer is coming up. And if you're looking at a trip to Bora Bora or the Maldives or any of those tropical destinations, they can be hard to get to. And so it might be opportunistic of you to use StatusJet. If you have family, if you have friends, if you have the means to do it, you might want to look into it because it is that level of luxury that allows you to stay fresh for that trip after that long travel instead of going through the airport and TSA and all those things. Flying private is that incredible level of luxury that when you take a trip of that caliber, you really ought to at least look into if you can to enjoy that. So StatusJet, their whole team can take care of you. Use the code PonyUpACC for a discount on a round trip flight. Mention on theponyexpress.com. David Henry and his entire team at StatusJet will take care of you. They're proud supporters of SMU Athletics and our partner here at On the Pony Express. The transfer portal is heating up, and SMU did host a visitor over the weekend. We dropped that news at ontheponyexpress.com. We dropped a follow-up on that news on Monday. SMU nearing a transfer portal commitment. We will keep an eye on that. It's another reason why you should subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com for just $1 for your first 2 months by using the code SMU1. That's SMU, the number 1. But let's get back to the high school ranks of recruiting for SMU football. Let's lead off with that. It's been a minute since we've discussed that. SMU still sits with the top 25 class in the country in the class of 2025, led by Kelen Russell, the top 100 prospect and top 10 quarterback in the country, who did, unfortunately for SMU, pop over to Austin for an unofficial visit on Sunday. That is important to note because he did not get a chance to check out the spring game as he was running track for Duncanville on their 4x400 team. They qualified for state, so he'll be headed there with the Panthers looking to win another state championship, but this time on track. He's obviously won back-to-back state championships with the Panthers on the field and is one of the most sought-after quarterbacks in the country right now with just what he has to offer so many programs. He is dynamic in terms of distributing the football and getting it out to those elite playmakers that Duncanville has. And he's been able to obviously have a lot of success. Texas did host him. And look, talking with sources around this recruitment, both on the SMU side, the Texas side, there's no doubt that SMU is having to battle to keep Keelon Russell in the fold. And that's exactly what you would expect with a quarterback of his caliber. Other teams just aren't going to go away. Texas A&M has a quarterback commitment in Hassan Longstreet. Texas has a quarterback commitment in KJ Lacey. Look, we talked about that on Friday when we talked about Keelon Russell, kind of resetting things there. But now that he did make an unofficial visit to Texas on Sunday, you can say that the Longhorns are certainly a team to watch. You know, he went down to Texas A&M. Texas A&M is taking one quarterback. That, in that case, has closed the book with Hassan Longstreet jumping on board with the Aggies. But if other schools don't give up on Hassan Longstreet and he flips elsewhere, that would obviously put Texas A&M at least back in the mix to land Keelon Russell, and honestly probably put them as the favorite over Texas in terms of the teams with chances to flip him from SMU. Texas did host him. They're keeping an eye on him, obviously, because KJ Lacey, their quarterback commitment, is being pursued by so many colleges around the country, but in particular, Alabama and Auburn. They're trying to get him to stay in state at from not too far from where he's at right now in Saraland. SMU is going to have a chance on May 17th, their big recruiting weekend, to impress upon him the need for him to stay home. And look, NIL is, when you're talking about top 100 prospects, pretty much always going to play a factor. And that is the thing that I mentioned on the podcast last week, but somebody on the board wanted me to kind of go into a little bit more detail. And so just kind of a little bit more on SMU and what I can share about the world of NIL when it comes to the high school ranks for SMU. And as they went into the high school recruiting a little bit more with, 4-star prospects, there's going to be a little bit more of that in recruiting for SMU because you are playing at a higher level. Most prospects are going to not necessarily need NIL, but that's just the name of the game in high school recruiting and high-level high school recruiting. And so Kelen Russell is no different in that respect. And so when it comes to SMU and NIL, they are going to start, through the collectives, going into that a little bit more because it's just what kind of has to happen as SMU takes the next step into the Power 4 world. And SMU wants to build through the high school ranks. And so when you look at high school recruiting and kind of how this is going to happen for SMU, you obviously look at the usual suspects in terms of the collectives, Pony Sports, DTX, the Boulevard Collective. It sounds like they're going to continue to hash out their budget and plan when it comes to dealing with prospects. And not every prospect's going to get NIL. Not every prospect's going to get a big deal. When you have certain levels of prospects, there are going to be certain levels that the market will still dictate to you as to what it should be. Like for a high-level quarterback, it's a pretty penny. And that's regardless if Keelon Russell ends up getting pursued heavily by a Texas or a Texas A&M or not. You look at Florida, you look at Ole Miss, you look at some of these other schools that are hanging around in this recruitment, and SMU is going to have to use NIL in the end to help all the other things that they've done in this recruitment stand out. Because, look, it's becoming a business. And like it or not, Keelon Russell is that dude that should be compensated for how good he is. And I'm not particularly keen on NIL heavy in the high school ranks. I'd rather go NIL heavy on a few sure things in the high school ranks and then point your guns at the portal. But Keelon Russell is a strong candidate to be compensated by whatever program he ends up at. And so SMU, really the collectives, know the market rate for certain positions and certain levels of quarterbacks, and that'll ultimately help determine what kind of deal he should command. But if you look at Bryce Underwood, who's committed to LSU, he's the number one player in the entire country in the class of 2025. I mean, those types of players, Nico Iamaleava with Tennessee a couple years ago, those types of players command, $1 million. And it's crazy, but that's kind of what it is. So when you look at the next step for SMU when it comes to NIL, it is building out that budget, and it is taking some money that in the past might have been earmarked for portal guys or retaining your own roster and saying, okay, we're going to go a little bit here because we have to nail this position and we have to nail this position group. So let's help ourselves get there by landing impressive high school prospects. So it's all a balancing act. And in terms of when that all kicks in, I don't really know. It depends. I think there are some rules against that happening in Texas for Texas high school football players. So it's all a line to walk when it comes to all of that. And that goes for any college recruiting Texas high school football players. So, and Flock of Seagulls asked, how do we anticipate high school NIL offers stacking up against portal offers? I think I kind of talked about that, and it was kind of the last piece I think I wanted to address on your question was, I mean, it just all depends. I mean, depends on the level of player you're in discussion with, both in high school, both in portal. It depends on the need. It depends on how critical that player is to the class. It's all relative to the talent and need for that player and the competition and what they're doing too. So it's something that SMU wants to move towards, is helping that high school recruiting with NIL, which is not really something SMU's done in the past, and well, in modern history. And so now that they're doing it, they're getting more into that space, and it'll just be something that is developed over the course of time. So we'll be keeping an eye on it. That's what I can tell you. And that's why it's also so important for Kelen Russell to keep staying committed, because I don't know the exact rules, but other schools, and I mean, pretty much everybody talks about NIL with high school prospects, whether it be collectives. I'm pretty sure it's collectives. So the conversations that need to happen will be happening at some point with Kelen Russell. And who knows, that could play another factor in his recruitment as it unfolds. So we'll be keeping an eye on it. So for the second straight podcast, we open with the Kelen Russell segment, but he is that important in a way. He is a back-to-back state champion. He's somebody that is not a finished product, but I could see him maybe finding a way on the field as early as, a freshman, kind of a limited role as a freshman, and then go from there. He really looks the part. He's a good one. So if SMU can keep him, that would be monumental for this class. When you look now at the high school ranks, and we've talked about what's next, and looked ahead to this major month of recruiting in May that we're still, a weekish away from getting close to, SMU is going to have a few prospects come through the May 10th weekend. We're going to try to update that and see where things stand. They did see Elijah Barnes, a 4-star linebacker, and Ricky Stewart, a 4-star running back, commit to Texas. Both were expected to be in on that weekend. We'll see if they still take those visits. But the big weekend for SMU is going to be the May 17th weekend, which Kelen Russell will be there. All the local commitments will be there for SMU, and they'll have a lot of their top targets just overall on campus for that weekend. As far as the recruiting class as it stands, it's only April as of now. It's getting close to being May, and this is that time of year that you're going to start to see a lot of decisions be made, and things move rather quickly when it comes to those decisions. Pretty much as soon as that transfer portal window ends and a lot of these programs get a good idea for what they're going to have spots-wise for 2025, now you'll start seeing a run on prospects that could end up committing, and maybe some coaches were keeping them warm or keeping them, just kind of at arm's length. And now that portal window where teams can address, and that's not just it. There's still going to be the winter one, of course, but you have a better idea if you stumbled upon a multi-year player at any position that could impact how you have been recruiting certain players at certain spots for your roster. And so SMU is in that boat. If SMU does in fact reel in a talented safety with multiple years, well, okay, then you have one guy who's going to be on campus here for this fall, learning, developing. You have 3 safeties in Elijah Pratt, Nathan Tillman, and Tyron Polley committed. You're in good shape. don't know if you need to take another safety in the 2025 class, even though they have some guys out there that they're certainly recruiting and set to host for these recruiting weekends that are coming up. And they've seen some of these guys. Benjamin Alafayo just committed to Arizona State. He's from out west, but he was supposed to officially visit. He was a guy they could see playing all over. We're seeing some movement here pretty quickly on some of these players. J.J. Shelton out of Dallas South Oak Cliff committed to Arkansas while on a visit. There are players that are going to come off the board in the coming weeks and, of course, months. SMU's hoping that they can get to this stage with some of these players on official visits and maybe even flip some of them if they can still get them to come through campus for that visit. Joseph Smith out of the Houston area is a safety, highly thought of, committed to Arizona State. He was on campus for the spring game or a spring practice earlier this month. He's somebody that SMU would love to flip. So it's all line to walk with roster spots and prioritizing certain positions. And that is what SMU is going to try to do as May 10th weekend, May 17th weekend, and June 7th weekend really come quick. In the next, this is why you should subscribe for $1 for your 2 months with code SMU1, is because if you subscribe for that deal, you're on board through the end of June. And that is that critical period of time where probably 85% of this class is going to be done. And we're going to know whether SMU hit on some of these guys that they were recruiting and they landed commitments and they are full, or they maybe need to address positions in the transfer portal. And that becomes a more of a priority for the fall transfer portal window because they won't have somebody coming in at a certain spot. You look at J.J. Shelton and Elijah Barnes, 2 Dallas area prospects that SMU is really pushing for both of them to end up at Texas and Arkansas. And look, Elijah Barnes was a tougher pull. Don't get me wrong, top 100 prospect. I mean, he's running like the wind in track at 6'2"-ish, 230 pounds. But J.J. Shelton, that was somebody you're kind of hoping you could hit on. Now you're going out to California and bringing in Mark Ihananker for an official visit in June. But before that, you're also going to have Caleb Burns from Houston on campus. You're going to have maybe J.J. Shelton still come through for an official visit if he wants to, May 17th. And so you'll see a lot of this class decided over the next really coming weeks and month and a half or so. We'll know how legit SMU's chances are to sign a top 25 class by the middle of June, quite frankly. And there are still some guys that we could see it play out into the fall, and they can keep working on a flip like it happened with Speedy Nettles this fall, that SMU was able to break through and ultimately sign him. And if they have more success than people maybe think they would have in the recruiting side on the field, then maybe more success comes in recruiting this fall for SMU, and they're able to take advantage and really, make a good push late to get some of these guys that maybe were thinking, okay, I'm going to end up going elsewhere right now and commit elsewhere, but I'm keeping an eye on SMU. I'm either from Dallas or I'm from somewhere in Texas. I'm just not there yet with them. I want to see what happens when they go to the ACC, see what it's like on a game day when Florida State's in town, or when BC, or when Pitt, all of those things, and then make an assessment. And I think that's really important for SMU, is that as this fall unfolds, getting some of these guys in for key games is going to be important, because it is going to be a different level of excitement around some of these home games. And having some of these players see the vision of what SMU could be, finally maybe be there and tangible, will be important for this staff to maybe be able to have that and share that with these prospects that they're recruiting. So it's been relatively quiet on the visit front for SMU and all that since the spring game happened. And SMU did host some quality prospects on campus, and we'll kind of run some of those down for you guys since that didn't happen because we obviously went on a little bit of a break there for Jack to come along and join us. But SMU did have some of their top prospects on campus, and I look back on some of them, and SMU has done a really nice job with a lot of these players. But in particular, I think one that is really starting to stick out to me a little bit more as SMU goes through the process with him is Zayden Crimpin out of Prosper. Garen Justice has done a really nice job recruiting him, and he's a 4-star. He's an on 300 prospect. He's a really, really good player. SMU's been able to host him probably 4 times, I think, at least over the course of this spring already. And the staff has really made him a big priority. And I think that's important is in 2026, and I'm jumping ahead here, but we didn't give these guys their due really. But in 2026, SMU has an opportunity to really make a statement if they can between some of the guys that they have been recruiting and have been kind of loosely connected to, but they haven't been able to break through because there's been times where SMU's been in the AAC. And you know that a Zayden Crimpin wouldn't have any chance of ending up at SMU if not for the move to the ACC. And now you look at it, and SMU is going to swing big with some of the heavyweights that are recruiting him. And the reason is because they've kept it real with him. They've made him feel like a priority as he's come through, and he's built good relationships with some of the guys that SMU's hosted. And kind of in that same light, you want the opposite side of the ball to feel the same. And they're certainly doing that with guys like KJ Ford from Duncanville and Zachary Turner from Duncanville, 2 on 300 prospects that Rhett Lashley was meeting with during the game, walking them through what they were doing on the field, making them feel like they are a key to SMU's recruiting efforts in 2026, and they most certainly are. SMU had some nice quality prospects on campus for the spring game that were able to get a look at the campus and understand, okay, we know that you're not hosting the spring game because of the massive renovation going on to Ford Stadium. And those are all things that show continued investment in the program, which these prospects like to see. And so, I'm keeping a close eye on some of these Dallas area prospects that are really starting to kind of show that they are very interested in the program and not just maybe going through the motions. And with the move to the ACC, SMU has some of these things in their back pocket. Look, they're going to lose some of the recruiting battles to call them blue blood recruiting powers of the state over the last couple of decades and years and years and years in Texas and Texas A&M. I mean, they just have just a little bit something different to sell, especially both being in the SEC. But there are also players that are going to say, you know what, I want to stay home and I want to play a high level of competition. I can do that at SMU. And I think in the class of 2026, the staff is really starting to maybe hit on that a little bit with some of these guys and really get them to buy into that idea that they can do this in their hometown. And those are just a couple of the guys that early on, at least, have kind of with their actions maybe backed it up a little bit. Not saying they're going to land them, but you look at the amount of time SMU's had with a lot of them, it's kind of important in terms of trying to dive deep into some of these recruitments and figure out, at least early on, what's real, what's not. So it's going to be a lot of fun to keep an eye on recruiting these next couple of years, especially if SMU gets a little hot this fall on the field, has some tangible success that they can show. Maybe that heats things up even more so. With that, wanted to remind you guys, our friends at Status Jet can take care of you. They have big planes, small planes, helicopters. They can get you from point A to point B with that level of luxury that you'd expect. And I mean, when it comes to finding those luxury destinations, Status Jet can help you, determine where you maybe want to go. If you're between a place here or a place there, maybe they'll be able to give you a little bit more feedback and help plan that incredible trip for you. Again, with that level of luxury you'd expect. And Aspen is another one that we get a lot of questions about when it comes to private jet experiences. They have flown there religiously almost. Plenty of clients, plenty of families, friends, business associates have all gone on trips there. That's another highlightable destination for you guys if you're looking at the private jet charter company space and seeing what your options are. Status Jet, they've got so many different places that they can get you to. We're just trying to highlight some of the options that you guys have in this space. So again, Pony Up ACC is the code for a discount on a round trip flight. Check them out, statusjet.com for more information. Let's close with basketball, and made you guys wait a little bit on this one. I don't know why, but Andy Enfield and his staff did get their first commitment of their era, and that is Kario Oquendo committing to SMU. That is the first commitment for the Mustangs. He's a big boy and comes over from Oregon by way of Georgia. He spent his first 2 seasons with the Bulldogs before ending up in Eugene this past year. He averaged 7.2 points and 2.4 rebounds per game for the Ducks. His role, he really started out red hot, but ended up just kind of being a off the bench guy for them. He shot 45.9% from the field, and also he took it to Andy Enfield himself with 15 points. So that might have stuck with them when they were looking for a transfer portal guard to bring in. Of course, SMU's lost Zurich Phelps, and they've lost Denver Anglin and Ricardo Wright as well in the backcourt. So they need to address that position without a doubt. And I think a veteran guy like this makes a ton of sense. And he started out at JUCO. He's earned his way up. So people say, 4 schools in 5 years. I mean, the guy had to start out at JUCO. So, I mean, that's just kind of sometimes the destination. Went to Georgia and then ended up transferring to Oregon. And it looked like it was going to be a good marriage there in Eugene, but then his just playing time kind of dropped off. Played 18 total minutes in the Ducks 2 NCAA tournament games. But I really think for SMU, look, if you're asking me if this is a guy who you've got to be sitting here saying, wow, he's going to start, he's going to do this. No, absolutely not. But you've lost some depth in the backcourt, and you've lost some starters in the backcourt. And so you have to address that. And this is somebody that the staff has seen up close and personal playing in the Pac-12. And his experience, he's played 96 career games. He's averaged double digits in scoring over the course of his career. So he's got some opportunities ahead of him at SMU where he could revitalize his career a little bit. He played in 36 games for the Ducks. It's not like he was playing in half of them. He played a ton of games for the Ducks. He played, started 3 games for Georgia. He started 59 of 60 games. So if he can bring all that back from his time in the SEC, maybe this ends up being a little bit even better of a pickup than it does appear to be on paper, which on paper appears to be a first guy off the bench type of pickup, which is fine. Not everybody can be a starter. What SMU now has to find is they have to find that starter level guard to come in there and be the point guard, because we've seen them not pick up point guards just yet. We've seen them miss now on a couple of other targets that they've been going after. So that is the big news, is that Kario Oquendo is joining the team. Checks in about 6'4", 220. He's got some highlight reel level dunks. I mean, he really does look the part athletically, and I want to phrase this kind of the right way. He is not somebody that I sit here and say, wow, awesome, he's going to start. That's exactly what this team needed. They need somebody to come in and start in the backcourt, especially at the point guard position. They need somebody who athletically can play in the ACC. Check. But it is not somebody that should be viewed in the light of, oh, is this our starting two? Is he going to play? Like, this is a guy that could come in, bring his experience, his athleticism. He's been able to average in double digits over the course of his career. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out at Oregon, but shot 45% from the field last year. You want to see him improve on his three-point shooting just a little bit. But overall, I mean, this is a good pickup. And when people talk about making the next jump to the ACC from the AAC, if you look back on some of the transfers that SMU's added, I mean, you could argue that this is a little bit better than Chuck Harris. I mean, coming from Butler, Chuck has had a ton of experience. He's scored in double digits. He's been that guy. And we saw what Chuck can be. Chuck can be one of the better players on the court when he's on. It's his consistency. Kario coming in is on paper light years better than any other guard outside of Chuck that's been brought in through the transfer portal in a minute. I mean, this is a good land for the ACC. It is not, in my opinion, an elite impact guy that could start right away. He could end up starting. He started in 59 games in his career, but the expectation is he's going to contribute. He's going to help this team. And so I just want to kind of point out that in the light of some of these commitments and as they press for guys, you've also got to look at it when it comes to the role and what he could bring to the table for SMU. So Kario Oquendo jumps on board for SMU as their first commitment of the Andy Enfield era. They did host Vince Iwuchukwu, a big 7'1" center who played for Andy Enfield at USC. St. John's is supposed to be in there as well as far as a challenger for the Mustangs. They hosted him before that. So we'll be keeping a close eye on SMU and Vince, see if they can get him across the finish line and get him on board. He had 16 starts in 45 games over the past two seasons with USC. He averaged 5.4 points and 3.4 rebounds while shooting 50.6% from the field. He started 11 of 31 games this past year, so that improved from his first year. So we'll see how it goes with Vince. And the Mustangs are still awaiting word from Brody Kozlowski, four-star wing combo forward, but really wing, that Andy Enfield and his staff had committed at USC. Kind of the big news, though, and this is, tough, but SMU does have other combo forwards lined up to visit, and you can find that at ontheponyexpress.com. But St. Thomas, one of the top small forwards in the country, visited SMU. He's kind of kept things quiet. It was big that they got him on campus. Well, he had visited USC earlier in the week, and he turns around as soon as he gets back from that SMU visit, and he commits to USC, which is always tough when it comes to here's my thought on this. I think for me, missing head-to-head in competition with Eric Musselman, who replaced Andy Enfield at USC, doesn't mean Andy Enfield's going to fail at SMU. It doesn't mean Eric Musselman's going to win big at USC. But it would have been a really nice to land player for momentum when you can say you beat out USC and you beat out some other top programs for him, but it wasn't meant to be. They missed on him. They've got to circle the wagons and find somebody else to continue to try and push this roster in the right direction. St. Thomas would have helped. There are more options. There are guys that enter the portal every day. We have seen so many starter level quality players enter over the past week. We see one a day at least, and I'm not religiously following every single basketball portal entrant, but I see them as they come across from Joe Tipton, and it's like, wow, okay, that guy was double digit from such and such place. Davion Smith from Utah entered over the weekend. We've seen I could pull it up. There are still 8 days left in the transfer portal window, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, for guys to enter. And that is big because SMU would love to obviously add some talent, as would many other schools. But it is a process, I guess. And we'll have to judge it all when it's all done. That's the thing about it. And, I was talking with somebody today on Monday, a couple hours ago, and they asked, what's following the transfer portal like? Well, half of it is really just following, is that guy that I heard is going to enter, and goes for coaching staffs too, going to actually enter? And if so, well, I think we're the favorite, or I think X school is the favorite. But what's actually going to happen? Is all of that true? Is what I've been told true? So up until the transfer portal window closes, and even after that for grad transfers, there are players that are going to enter, and there are players that are close to entering, and there are players that are being tampered with, and collectives are talking to, and all sorts of different things. And at the end of the day, and I know it seems like a cop-out, but it's the reality, you've got to look at when the final pieces to the puzzle are all in place, and SMU is hopefully, because the past staffs haven't always done this, but used up all 13 scholarships. What's that roster look like? Who have they added that can help SMU win in the ACC in year one? Have they brought in anyone that might be a developmental guy that they can say, all right, Brody Kozlowski, we've got Jaheim Hudson back. We ended up finding another combo forward wing. What maybe next year your role is a big one, or you play some minutes right away, but we kind of bring you along. Every player has a role, and it's a matter of finding the right pieces to the puzzle for this staff to make a competitive product on the floor in year one. And over the course of Andy Enfield's career, for the most part, he's shown that he can do that. So he hasn't had a new job in 11 years or so, but SMU has one commitment on board. It is a good one. If his role is to be a guy who's first off the bench, he's a veteran Power 5 player. He's not somebody you're projecting to say, okay, he put up 18 points at a mid-major or lower level. Let's see if he can do it. He looks like a good athlete. No, he's done it for 96 games against high major competition with varying degrees of success. That's a relatively sure thing as far as what you're going to get out of him. What they need to get out of him is that player that was at Georgia, and push him in that direction and get that out of him. And then maybe he turns into a player that's far better than you even think he was going to be on paper. It's all finding the pieces to the puzzle, seeing what fits, seeing who can be helpful to this program as they enter year one under Andy Enfield. And I wish we had all the answers, and I wish we knew what the roster would be already and everybody's roster would be, but we don't, and it's still a work in progress. So keep an eye on it. There are good things happening. There's bad things. There's things that come out of nowhere. Like I said last week, I said they're recruiting other people that I might not know about. Kario Oquendo commits a couple hours later. So that's kind of how it goes for this new era, as I'm trying to learn sources and kind of where the board is and things like that. And at the end of the day, Andy Enfield and his staff that he's brought in so far have a lot of skins on the wall in terms of having success and putting together competitive rosters. So, and right or wrong, I'm probably going to give him the benefit of the doubt. It's probably a smart thing for me to do in general, but you also have a guy who's shown it more often than not that he is going to have a competitive roster, and he's going to have you in the mix to get to the NCAA tournament. Might not be this year for SMU, but he's going to push it in the right direction. He's shown that over the course of his career, And so till he proves me otherwise, I don't have too much of a reason to not believe that could very well end up being the case for SMU under Andy Enfield. It's just fascinating to watch this roster come together. So kind of a rambling mess there on the basketball front, but lots of moving pieces all at once. So we'll be keeping a close eye on it for you at On the Pony Express. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. We'll be back later this week with another edition of the pod. Thanks for listening. And again, check out ontheponyexpress.com. Use code SMU1. That's SMU, the number 1, for $1 for your first 2 months. Get you almost through the whole month of June in a busy time for the Mustangs. So thanks for listening. I'm Billy Embody. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody.
Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU.
And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.